the 18th of April 1942. North Pacific, 650 miles east of Honshu. Salt spray hammers the bow of USS Hornet CV-8 as she shoulders through gray water, her wooden flight deck slick with cold rain and gasoline fumes. Engines growl at idle. 16 olive-drab B-25B Mitchell bombers sit lashed down like stowaways on a ship that was never meant to carry them. Their props tick over, their wings overlap, their noses point west toward Japan. Lieutenant Colonel James Harold, Jimmy Doolittle, walks the line for the last time. He's short, compact, 45 years old, and very calm. He moves like a man crossing a parking lot, not a pitching flight deck in combat range of the Japanese Empire. He taps each bomber's aluminum skin with his glove, leans in through open hatches, shouts final words that are swallowed by wind. Remember the fuel discipline. Stay low, stay fast, pick your target, and clear the city. You can see men watching him from behind. Mae West, life vests and leather flight helmets, pilots, co-pilots, bombardiers, gunners. Most of them are in their 20s. Most of them have never seen combat. And they all understand something that no one back home in the States will know until later. This is probably a one-way mission. Over on the starboard side, ensigns and chiefs from Hornet's Naval Air Group stand in a loose row, pretending not to stare. The Navy flies fighters and dive bombers off carriers. Medium Army bombers? Nobody does that. Nobody has ever done that. This is improvisation masquerading as doctrine. The sea is wrong today, too rough, too soon. The task force, under Vice Admiral William F. Halsey, Jr., has been spotted by a Japanese picket boat at dawn, long before the planned launch point. Radio intercepts say the enemy got a warning out. Hornet can't get any closer without risking interception. So now, every calculation they rehearsed in California is broken. Instead of launching at 450 miles from Tokyo, they're being forced to launch at roughly 700 miles. That extra distance is deadly. It means fuel margins once over Japan will be razor thin. It means darkness will catch them over China, if they even reach China at all. It means bailout, capture, maybe execution. On the flight deck forward, Doolittle climbs up the nose of his own bomber, plane 40 to 2344. The name Doolittle is stenciled on the side the way a promise is carved into a headstone. He slides into the left seat, buckles in, and pulls his headset over his cap. His co-pilot, Lieutenant Richard Dick Cole, adjusts the throttles, glances at the deck. There's barely 500 feet of takeoff run available. A normal Mitchell needs more than twice that. Captain Mark Mitcher, Hornet's skipper, leans over the bridge rail, binoculars tucked against his chin. His jaw is set like a welded seam. Below him, sailors crouch along the deck edges, rain dripping from their helmets, watching history step on the gas. You hear the air whistle across the bow. You hear the signal flags crack. You feel Hornet turn slightly into the wind to buy a few more knots of lift that might decide whether the first bomber flies or cartwheels into the Pacific and explodes. At 0820, Halsey's voice goes out across the fleet in plain English, unencoded, meant to be remembered, to Colonel Doolittle and his gallant command. Good luck, and God bless you. The men on every ship in the task force stop what they're doing. Engines spool. The first Mitchell's twin, Wright R, 2,600 Cyclones roar to full power, propeller arcs turning into white discs. The whole bomber shudders hard enough that the wings look alive. One chalk is kicked clear, then the other. Doolittle eases the brakes off. The bomber lurches forward. For a moment it looks too slow. The nose tires bump and skip against a deck that rises and falls like the back of some animal. You can feel the weight 4 men, fuel tanks shoved into the bomb bay and crawl spaces, incendiaries, and 500-pounders armed and live. The B-25 rolls past Hornet's island structure, past knots of sailors pressed flat against bulkheads, past a white line painted across the deck that says, "This is where normal planes lift." It keeps rolling. There's only ocean ahead. Cole calls out airspeed. Doolittle holds it down, holds it down, holds it down, then hauls back, and the bomber's nose lifts off the deck by what looks like inches. The Mitchell drops toward the waves, vanishes in spray, and then, impossibly, claws itself back into view, heavy and stubborn, wings flexed, skimming maybe a dozen feet above the Pacific, headed straight for Tokyo. One plane is airborne. 15 more still have to try. January 1942. Washington, D.C. The United States is angry, humiliated, and bleeding. Pearl Harbor is still smoking scrap on the bottom of Battleship Row. The Philippines are collapsing. Wake Island fell. The Japanese flag is spreading across maps like spilled ink. And back home, people want to hit Japan, not someday, not after a long buildup, but now. President Franklin D. Roosevelt asks a simple, impossible question. Can we bomb Tokyo? On paper, the answer is no. Tokyo is more than 2,000 miles from Hawaii. No American land base is close enough. Navy carrier planes can reach Japanese cities along the edges. Maybe. But they can't carry big bombs far inland. And carriers can't sail straight up to Honshu without committing suicide. Japan thinks this is permanent truth. Then somebody in naval aviation and somebody in the Army Air Forces start asking a heretical follow-up. What if we put Army bombers on a Navy carrier? Medium bombers like the North American B-25B Mitchell have things carrier planes don't. Longer range, heavier bomb load. But they're huge compared to carrier fighters. They don't have tail hooks. They can't land back on the carrier. They drink fuel. The deck run needed for takeoff is obscene. Jimmy Doolittle walks into this conversation like a man volunteering to jump off a roof if it'll prove the math. Doolittle isn't just a pilot. He's a test pilot, racer, aeronautical engineer, stunt flyer, the kind of brain that treats "not designed for this" as a dare. He studies the Mitchell and says, strip it down, lose weight anywhere you can, pull out the lower turret, rip out unnecessary gear, add auxiliary fuel tanks in the bomb bay, in the crawl space, even in what used to be the ventral gun position. Swap the tail guns for wooden broomsticks painted black to look like 50 cals in case Japanese fighters try to come up behind them. Every gallon of fuel is one more minute toward China. He starts recruiting crews in March 1942 from the 17th Bomb Group. The pitch is vague and ruthless. Extremely dangerous mission, high importance, volunteers only, no details. Men raise their hands anyway. You're not watching superheroes. You're watching guys from Ohio and Texas saying yes because somebody asked. Training happens at Eglin Field, Florida, and it looks ridiculous. B-25 seconds practice short field takeoffs, pretending that the end of the runway is the Pacific Ocean. Pilots learn to yank a 15-ton bomber airborne in under 500 feet without stalling it into the ground. Bombardiers rehearse low-altitude approaches at 1,500 feet, then 1,000, then 500, then treetop height. They learn to come in so low that anti-aircraft gunners on the ground have to shoot down at them instead of up. Nobody tells them the target right away, but everybody starts to guess. Mid-April, USS Hornet meets USS Enterprise at sea. Enterprise will provide fighter cover with its F-4F Wildcats and scouts with its SBD Dauntless dive bombers. Hornet will carry the Army bombers. The two carriers and their escorts cruisers, destroyers, oilers, form Task Force 16 under Halsey. On the 2nd of April 1942, Hornet steams out of San Francisco Bay with 16 hulking Mitchells lashed to her flight deck, shocking every civilian watching from shore. There's no way to hide this. Reporters see it. Rumors fly. We're delivering them to Hawaii. We're ferrying them to the Philippines. Nobody says we're going to bomb the emperor's capital, because that sentence feels like science fiction. Inside Japan, meanwhile, the Imperial General Headquarters is relaxed. Since December 1941, Japanese planners have told themselves and the public that the home islands are beyond reach. The Imperial Navy shattered the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. American carriers are dangerous, yes, but their range is limited. The Americans are reeling, disorganized, soft. Let them scream about revenge. Let them print cartoons of Uncle Sam punching Mount Fuji. None of it matters. Toy raiders, one staff officer jokes. Propaganda fantasies. Tokyo is supposed to be untouchable. Back in the North Pacific, early morning on the 18th of April 1942, that assumption is about to be set on fire. A Japanese picket boat, one of the converted fishing trawlers, strung like a picket line far from home waters, spots them. The boat gets off a contact report before U.S. cruisers silence it with gunfire. Radio intercepts suggest that the warning reaches Japan. Halsey doesn't hesitate. He can't. If the Japanese Navy sorties now with a fast carrier group, Hornet will be caught with 16 Army bombers choking her deck and zero room to launch fighters. That's how you lose a carrier. That's how you lose the mission. So Halsey sends the message. Launch immediately. Here's the problem. They are still roughly 600 and 5,700 miles from Tokyo. Every extra mile means less fuel for the run to China. Doolittle does the math, does it again, then nods once. They'll go anyway. You're on the flight deck again now, knees flexed against the roll, smelling avgas and hot oil and salt. The first bomber is gone, Doolittle's. The second Mitchell inches forward, engines screaming, tires hissing on wet planking. Sailors crouch flat as the wingtip passes over their heads. The pilot stares down the bow like it's a gun barrel pointed at him. One by one they leap. Some of the B-25 seconds bounce so hard on rotation that the watchers on deck gasp, sure they're about to stall and fall into the water. One bomber's left wheel actually clips a wave top before it claws back into ground effect, skimming the Pacific like a stone. Each crew wrestles a fully loaded medium bomber into the air, off a carrier, in open ocean, in rough seas, with almost no runway, and makes it work through will and physics. By 0920, all 16 are airborne and spearing west in loose trail at wavetop altitude, the task force already fading astern into mist. Hornet turns away, increases to flank speed, and runs for her life. Her job is done. Inside the B-25 seconds, the world narrows to engine vibration and compass headings. Most crews have stripped down to flight suits or leather jackets. The noses of the bombers are glassed-in greenhouses where bombardiers lie on their bellies over their Norden or improvised bomb sites, scanning the Pacific ahead. For hours, nothing but gray water and gray sky. Then, hours later, the coast of Japan lifts up out of the haze like a bruise. There is no fanfare, no interceptors waiting in neat formation, no net of radar-guided defenses like you'd see in Europe later in the war. Japan does not expect American bombers in daylight over the home islands because, according to Japanese thinking, American bombers cannot be in daylight over the home islands. So, when the Mitchells cross the shoreline and split, dropping to rooftop height, it feels less like an attack and more like a break in physics. Doolittle's group heads for Tokyo. Other elements peel off toward Yokohama, Yokosuka Naval Base, Nagoya, Kobe. Each crew has specific industrial and military targets: dockyards, factories, steelworks, oil storage. The intent is not to flatten Japan. 16 medium bombers cannot do that. The intent is to punch the myth. Tokyo late morning is alive, loud, normal. Streetcars clatter. Bicycles thread alleys. Women hang laundry from balconies. Office workers cross bridges over the Sumida River with briefcases and cigarettes. Then the first American bomber comes growling in low over the rooftops. Windows rattle. People look up, squinting. Some actually wave, assuming for a heartbeat these are Japanese planes returning from patrol. Then the red meatball on the wing isn't there. Instead, they see a white star in a dark circle. The city realizes. Air raid sirens begin to wind up. Doolittle's Mitchell roars in at a few hundred feet, engines howling, the Tokyo skyline flashing past in jagged slices, smokestacks, tram wires, tiled rooftops. The bombardier calls. Steady, steady. His voice is clipped, professional, fighting adrenaline. Below them is a sprawl of machine tools, assembly lines, fuel stores that feed Japan's war. Bombs away. The plane jerks lighter as the racks kick free. Cylinders of American steel tumble, fins glinting, then vanish into the industrial blocks below. A half-second later, the shockwaves punch back up through the fuselage. You don't hear Hollywood fireballs. You hear a deep, ugly crack, metal tearing, glass shattering. The Mitchell bounces in its own wake turbulence and keeps going. All across Tokyo and Yokohama and Nagoya, it repeats. Another bomber sweeps so low over factory roofs that laundry on clotheslines snaps like flags in its prop wash. A Japanese truck driver slams his brakes, stumbling out of the cab, staring up in disbelief as a green twin-engine bomber with American markings thunders past, close enough that he can see the pilot's goggles. Anti-aircraft guns finally start to answer. Some are light machine guns mounted on rooftops. Some are 25mm automatic cannon trucked in to defend important plants. Tracers stitch the air, mostly behind the bombers, because the gunners are swinging up too slowly, too high. One Mitchell takes hits to the fuselage, holes punch through aluminum like can openers. Another has a plexiglass panel in the nose, turned into glitter by a burst that misses the bombardier's face by inches. Japanese Army fighters, Nakajima Ki, 27 seconds, and Ki, 43 seconds, scramble, but they're climbing into scattered reports, not a coordinated intercept. The Americans are too low, too fast, already egressing. And unlike high-altitude raids, where fighters can set up head-on passes, this fight is chaotic street-level knife work. One fighter dives on a Mitchell and overshoots, nearly colliding with a radio tower. Gunners in the bomber's dorsal turret swing their twin. 50 seconds, and let go a burst that scares the interceptor off. In some aircraft, where the tail guns are nothing but painted broom handles jammed into the rear glazing, the illusion alone is enough to make pursuing fighters hesitate. On the ground, Tokyo civilians watch flames climb into the midday haze. For the first time in the modern era, the capital of Imperial Japan is under direct American attack. In an office building, a clerk shouts that this must be British. Another swears it's sabotage. An older man in a dark uniform, a staff officer from the Imperial Army, stares through a shattered window at the column of smoke rising from a factory complex and whispers almost to himself, "America?" The bomb loads are small compared to what will come later in the war, mostly 500-pound demolition bombs and clusters of incendiaries. But damage is not just measured in craters, it's measured in shock. The home islands were sold to the Japanese public as a sanctum. The emperor's realm was beyond reach. The Americans were described in boardrooms and briefings as disorganized, timid, racially inferior, incapable of bold, precise strikes. Now, American bombers are literally dragging their shadows along Tokyo streets. Inside one of the Mitchells, the radio operator grips the edge of his table and laughs, not because it's funny, but because nerves need somewhere to go. "We're really doing it," he shouts over the engines. "We're bombing Tokyo." Some crews snap quick handheld photos through side windows. Proof, evidence, something to show the world. By the time Japanese air defenses begin to coordinate, the raiders are already turning southwest, skimming over open water and farm country, staying low, on course for the East China Sea. The fuel gauges are not comforting. The needles are sliding down toward empty, and there is still hundreds of miles to go. There is no plan to come back to Hornet. The Mitchells are too big to land on a carrier, and Hornet is already racing east to avoid counterattack. The plan always was to bomb Japan, then continue west to friendly airfields in free China. But the fuel calculations they made before launch assumed a much shorter takeoff point. That was before the picket boat, before the early launch, before the extra 200-300 miles were added like a curse. Now, every man aboard every bomber understands the math in his stomach. Most of them will be bailing out into darkness. South China Sea air becomes black, wet, endless. Inside Doolittle's B-25, the cockpit is lit only by the faint glow of instruments. The interphone crackles. "We're not going to make the field," someone says. Nobody argues. Doolittle gives the order nobody wants but everybody expected. Prepare to bail out. You can feel the sudden quiet that isn't really quiet, just the shift from mission adrenaline to survival mode. Men snap parachute harnesses tight across their chests. Maps are folded and stuffed inside jackets. Sidearms are checked. One crewman tucks away a small American flag because, if he's going to hit the ground in Japanese-occupied territory, he wants something to hand the Chinese so they know he's not the enemy. One by one, the Mitchells run dry. Engines cough. Propellers windmill uselessly. Airspeed bleeds. Pilots hold level as long as they dare, keeping the fuselage stable so the rest of the crew can jump. Blackness. Rain in the face. The slap of cold air as the hatch opens. Then nothing under your boots. Crewmen tumble into night over rural China, pulling ripcords and praying not to snap a leg when they hit. Some land hard in rice paddies, in mud up to the knees. Some crash into trees. One man comes down in the middle of a small village and is immediately surrounded by lantern light and shouting in a language he doesn't speak. For a frozen second, he thinks these are Japanese collaborators. Then old men and teenagers alike grab him under the arms, half carry him, half drag him inside, wrapping him in blankets, shoving bowls of something hot into his hands, chattering, smiling. They have been told by the Chinese nationalist government, by resistance networks, that if Americans ever fall from the sky, protect them. Doolittle himself bails out, hits hard, and ends up in a rice field, soaked and coated in mud. He assumes, lying there in the dark with his parachute around him like a broken tent, that the mission was a failure. He has lost his plane. He's stranded in enemy-held territory. He's certain he will be court-martialed. He has no way of knowing yet what his raid just did. Not everyone reaches safety. One crew diverts north, running on fumes, and instead of China, they end up over Soviet territory. The Soviets, still bound by their neutrality pact with Japan, quietly intern them. Others are captured by Japanese forces after crash landing or bailing out over occupied zones. Those men will face interrogation, brutality, and, for some, execution. The cost of the Doolittle Raid is not just measured in fuel and aircraft. It will be paid in blood and captivity. But most of the raiders, with the help of Chinese civilians, guerrillas, and nationalist army units, are smuggled out by riverboat, by mule, on foot, through Japanese patrol lines, hidden in farmhouses and temples. It will take weeks for some of them to get out. It will take months for the full story to get home. Back in the United States, though, news moves faster than details. On the 21st of April 1942, American radio announces that U.S. Army bombers carried out a daring raid against military targets in Tokyo and other Japanese cities. Names and specifics are withheld for security, but the headline is enough. After months of defeats, America finally hit back. Factories ring with cheers. Newspapers print maps with big arrows stabbing straight at Tokyo. Morale, a word that felt hollow in February, suddenly has weight again. Inside Japan, morale moves too, but in the other direction. The Imperial General Headquarters is supposed to project perfect control. Senior Navy and Army officers meet in crisp uniforms under polished ceilings. Maps of the Pacific sit on long tables. Lines of advance, future conquests, resource flows, all neat, all inevitable. Not now. Now the room is strained and hot. Ash from the previous day's fires still drifts in some districts of Tokyo and Yokohama. Damage assessment reports are coming in. Oil tank farms hit. Light industry struck. Worker housing burned. Several dead. Dozens wounded. Materially, by the standards of modern total war, this is not catastrophic. Psychologically, it's a detonation. American bombers reached the capital. American bombers escaped. U.S. aircraft carriers were able to steam within launch distance of Honshu, strike, and withdraw. The Emperor's cities are not invulnerable. The Navy has failed to defend the home islands. For the Imperial Japanese Navy, especially Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, this is intolerable. Yamamoto has already been pushing an aggressive plan to force a decisive battle against the U.S. Pacific Fleet. He believes that if he can lure the remaining American carriers into a trap and annihilate them in one massive engagement, Japan can dictate terms and lock in its new empire before American industry fully awakens. Before the Doolittle Raid, that plan was bold. After the Doolittle Raid, it becomes urgent. Suddenly, the priority is not just expansion in the South Pacific or cutting Australia off. Suddenly, the priority is pushing Japan's defensive perimeter so far east that no American carrier can ever again get close enough to launch bombers at Tokyo. That perimeter line runs through a small, strategic atoll northwest of Hawaii, Midway. Yamamoto accelerates everything. Orders go out to prepare Operation MI, the seizure of Midway Atoll, and with it, the destruction of the remaining American carrier force when it predictably rushes to defend it. The logic is simple, almost arrogant. The Americans will have to come. When they do, Japan's carrier strike groups, fresh from victories across the Pacific, will be waiting in overwhelming strength. This is the point where the Doolittle Raid stops being just a daring morale mission and becomes a strategic lever. By bombing Tokyo, 16 B-25 seconds embarrassed the Japanese Navy in front of its own emperor and people. That humiliation sharpened Yamamoto's timetable. It helped pull the Imperial Navy into a high-risk operation in June 1942, just 7 weeks later at Midway. At Midway, 4 of Japan's frontline fleet carriers will sail into an ambush they do not know exists. American codebreakers will be ready. American dive bombers will be waiting. And in less than 10 minutes of combat, on the 4th of June 1942, Japan will lose Akagi, Kaga, and Soru in flaming cascades of aviation fuel and detonating ordnance. Hiru will follow before the day is out. The core of Japan's offensive carrier strength will be gutted. That chain Tokyo bombed in April, Midway lost in June, begins here, on Hornet's wet deck in the gray North Pacific, when men everyone called suicidal optimists proved the home islands could be touched. Back in China, meanwhile, the price keeps being paid. In retaliation for aiding the downed American crews, Japanese occupation forces unleash brutal reprisals across parts of eastern China. Villages suspected of sheltering raiders are burned. Civilians are interrogated, tortured, killed. The Doolittle Raid is not just a line in an American victory narrative. It is also a wound carved into Chinese soil. And yet, inside that complexity, one truth stands. Before the 18th of April, 1942, Japanese commanders could laugh at the idea of American bombers over Tokyo. They called them toys. They said the United States didn't have the reach, the nerve, the skill. After the 18th of April, 1942, nobody in Tokyo was laughing. The myth of invulnerability was gone. The countdown to Midway had started.